Hey, welcome to SportsBeat Live. We're coming to you from rainy Kansas City, rainy and which caused some delay in the start of the program. We apologize for that. Let's blame it on the rain anyway, right?
Sure.
We're going with rain. Hey, this is the show where we talk about the Kansas City Royals with the people in the media who know them best. Vahe Gregorian is here, Sam Mellinger, Lynn Worthy. We're going to talk Royals with you. Send us your questions and comments. We'll get to as many of them as we can. And want a big shout out to our sponsor, University of Kansas Health System. You'll hear from them later in the show. You know, it seems like when we talk, we always give maybe a little more emphasis to the most recent game, even though there's a week's worth of games, right? We come to you every Tuesday, and there hadn't been much to talk about, right? I think they won the night they won on last Tuesday night, right? That was the first game of the Yankee series, and they haven't won since, right? 6 in a row, the losing streak. But last night was a sort of a special kind of stink, I think, for the Royals. They made some changes. They got out to a big lead against the Red Sox at Fenway Park, and had Danny Duffy, their best pitcher, starting the game. Had Josh Stalmont come in, and those were the two pitchers that did them, ended up doing the most damage for the Royals. So a depressing kind of loss for the Royals, I think. Let's talk about these changes, though, that happened just for this game. I know that Sam, you led your Mellinger minutes this week with it, the changes. Let's start with this. Jorge Soler batting in the 2-hole. Yeah. What'd you make of that? And what's the objective of batting Soler up?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I saw it, just the lineup submitted, and like everybody else, I was like, hell's that? But the explanation I thought made sense, which is, I'm paraphrasing, but Mike Matheny basically said they're trying to get him to see more strikes, put him in front of Santana and Perez, their two most productive hitters so far, and also just sort of like get him out of this mental space that he's been in, where he's just trying to hit 3 home runs all to left field with every pitch, and just get him thinking just quality plate appearances, good contact. And I thought we saw that, I mean, I don't know how many times he's had an 0-2 hit to right field. I'm guessing the total's now 1.
Yes, I was going to say.
That's exactly. I mean, it doesn't always happen like that, and who knows? It's just one swing, but that's exactly what they were wanting to see.
Yeah, they got the result, right?
Yeah.
2 hits, 2 singles, both to the opposite field. And after the first one, he kind of smiled at first base. You noticed that? He, looked back in the dugout and laughed. Well, you found out, I guess, early in the day, right, Lynn, about this? Mike Matheny, when he talked to the reporters, what did Matheny say about it?
Well, it was interesting because, like you mentioned, the seeing more strikes, and I thought that was probably a good part of it. But when it sounded like that really wasn't as much a part of it as it was really just trying to get Soler thinking differently. Because when I asked, and I think analytics nowadays tells you that like lineup protection isn't quite, or will at least raise the question whether or not that's really that much of a thing anymore. And Matheny was really like, well, it's not so much that he was getting pitched around or anything like that. It was more that, they were exploiting adjustments he wasn't making, and he needed to have a different approach. And he kept on hitting on the fact that, like, it's not we're going to move him up to the 2 spot to have the same at-bats that he was having down in the lineup. It's like, that ain't it, basically. It's like that, no. He needs to come up to the 2 spot and adjust the way he's approaching these at-bats. And so that's why I think going the other way, having a short swing, shortening up 0-2, those were things that were legitimately encouraging to see.
Rex Hudler was pretty excited about it. He's been talking about it all year. I don't know. Is it too late to save Jorge Soler? I mean, what is he at? 6 or 7 home runs. Did 2 for 4 lift his batting average up over 200? Probably not.
I don't think so.
What are they going to do with Soler the rest of the way? You leave him here for now, right, at the 2-hole, and see if something comes of this change. And give Mike Matheny credit. He made a change and it worked. At least he's 1 game in and it worked. And maybe it does change Soler's approach, and he's not, hitting singles to the right. Gives him a chance, I think, to just free his mind a little bit, right? He's not going into the batter's box every time thinking he's got to pull something, hit it 450 feet. So, but Is there enough evidence now for Soler in a Royals uniform that to determine he's not going to be part of the future? What do you think?
Well, I think that's been a great question for a couple years, right? I mean, I think that you could have made a case that he gives them something different than they have, and yet not something that they necessarily can count on, or that they fit with best, right? So that I'm sure, in fact, I think you made the case that might be worth dealing him a year or two ago. Seeing what you
After
get
his big
then.
home run year?
After 2019, when he was hitting mostly in the 2-hole, right?
Not that year.
Not that year?
Last year, they
Was it
moved
last
him
year?
to the
Okay.
2-hole, but then the injuries and everything. So,
Yeah.
no, but that year it was still like he was batting in the middle of the lineup because remember that was the year there was no Salvi. It was him and Dozier batting sort of behind each other, and I think it was Witt. Trying to remember if was Mondi batting up that high that year. That was the year where he, I'm trying to remember how many games he played that year, but he had the two shoulder things. But he played a decent amount that year.
Well, that's right. Well, the broader point, I mean, I think the idea that this has been, now we're 3 months in, and you really do still feel like every day it's been a problem trying to hit 3 home runs on one pitch. Like, he's not adjusting. And good for them to try to scramble his sensors and put him in a different spot. But I do feel like it's the classic case of so far putting a guy in the same situation and expecting different results is not proven to take. I've come to feel like he's not really the fit here that they want. Maybe that's Captain Obvious, but I just feel like I thought no matter what, his production would be a couple notches higher, even if he was having a bad year. And instead, it's been abysmal.
Yeah, the point I've always thought about with him is that he's just a bad fit for the Royals. They play in this enormous stadium, and he doesn't cover a lot of ground. He's not a great outfielder. And I just think that power would play a lot better in another place. And I've wondered, for a couple of years, there's sort of been this internal would you rather extend Salvi or Soler? And Salvi got the contract, obviously. Soler didn't. He's in basically a walk year. And I've just wondered, this is complete armchair psychology speculation. I could be completely off base. But I just wonder if there's been an extra little bit of pressure that he's put on himself, knowing it's, sort of a free agency year for himself. And it just, that stuff can snowball the other way pretty quick in baseball.
And I wonder, and I think, Lynn, you spoke to people at spring training about this, but I sort of wondered how much that element became part of why he's been in the outfield again more this year. I don't really know what the rationale for that was, and maybe in some ways it's been okay. But I specifically remember talking to him in spring training 2020 before things shut down about how he hit much better because he had a free mind by not playing in the field. Mm-hmm. I mean, he said it. Like, I'm a better hitter when I'm not out there. I don't know how the numbers bear that out, but clearly emotionally he felt that way.
He has an enormous split, DH and outfield. I mean, it's his OPS is something you probably know better than I do. His OPS is like 100 and some points higher when he's a DH. It's significant. And
the thing is like I know they've said, and I feel like he's also said this too, that he likes playing the outfield. So I remember having some of these discussions, even going back to Ned, where like they felt like they needed to still get him out there at least semi-regularly. And I always wondered whether or not that was, trying to make sure that you kept some sort of value there, saying he wasn't just a full-time DH, but obviously nobody's going to come out and say that. But then there were times when you did hear Soler say that he enjoyed playing the outfield and he felt like, he was more than the DH. So I'm not sure, because you hear that, but then also you hear the other thing, like you said sometimes. So I think there's also probably part in the back of his mind, especially this year, where it's like, okay, if you can play multiple positions, and maybe even just you look at the offseason, there were some guys who were viewed as just DHs who were sitting on that free agent market for a while who were like legit sluggers, where you're talking about Nelson Cruz or, I think Ozuna was sort of in that boat too. And it's like, okay, well, then you cut off a good portion of the teams that might be interested. And I don't know how much of that is actually factoring in his mind, but, maybe that's part of I can play outfield too. I enjoy playing the outfield. So, but I know it's been one of those things where I wondered if it was, you got to make sure that you can show that he can do more than just DH to try and build some value. But if he's not hitting, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, they're not going to be able to trade.
Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
market
trade
for
him.
him.
Exactly.
And,
So
and I don't think he's going to be on the team next year. So
Yeah.
I just wondered, especially going to that number 2 spot, I think is really interesting, and the logic behind it is sound. But the other thing that I've wondered is put him at DH all the time, and not just because of what we've been talking about. He hits better there, but I don't like him and Dozier in the outfield at the same time. You know, you can
Oh,
get,
for sure.
well, yeah,
you know, that's not a good defensive outfield. And again, especially maybe you can get away with that at Fenway. You know, left field is so small, but you know when you're playing in Kauffman and you know or Seattle, like some of these bigger stadiums, I just think you need more ground to be covered.
Yeah, I think it was interesting because I felt like they were getting away with that because of where they were playing. Like you say, okay, in Yankee Stadium with the short porch, Fenway, in Kauffman, I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
I also, the thing with Soler that I sort of, I mean, and then, you mentioned it, the whole thing with Salvi. It's like when he got that money, then you knew that Soler probably was, an afterthought because the power numbers he's put up, that's where you're going to be able to ask for money is because he's got those home run numbers. At least he did. This year's probably changing that. But I'm not sure that, with, lost the train of thought there. But
Well, let me jump in and say
I'll
that
come back to it.
We'll come back. One of the benefits of not playing those two guys in the outfield together, Soler and Dozier, would be, I think Dozier, he's even more of a lost cause, I think, this year than Soler. But I think one thing that might be able to help Dozier a little bit is give him a position and let him stay there for a while. Let him stay in right field for a couple of weeks and see if that doesn't. From game to game, he's somewhere else, right? He's always playing a different place. So, I just think it might benefit him to have a position that he knows, spot in the lineup, a position, and let him play there. Now, that runs contrary to some thinking now about him that he's killing him, and it seems like he'll have a good day, and you think, okay, now he's out of it, and then it's the next 3 or 4, he's back in his 0 for 4 and striking out 3 times.
He does. It seems like he's got a day a week or
Yeah,
so where it just
yeah.
is like, hey,
Multiple
that's
hit
the
games,
guy.
yeah.
Yeah. And
Do
then,
you guys feel, at least I feel like I'm a lot more puzzled by him than I am by Soler. I mean, at Soler, we can kind of, it's pretty simple, break down what's going wrong with him. I don't really think I understand what's going wrong with Dozier.
I've wondered, my armchair psychology on him, and you know him better than I do, but he's a very organized sort of, type A, like kind of perfectionist. And I think that's part of why he's had the success and gotten to the big leagues and gotten the contract and everything. But I just wonder if that can sort of, again, too much pressure, like, white knuckling the bat and stuff like that. I don't know. I've wondered that with him because he's got that personality, I think. He's not just a grip it and rip it, sort of laid back guy. I mean, everything's got to be focused. And again, that's a good thing most of the time.
But I like that case for maybe just planting him somewhere. I mean, I don't think, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't think we should assume he's not part of their future the way we might assume it about Soler. I could be wrong.
Well, they just signed him in the
he's
deal.
got the
Yeah,
deal.
I was gonna say, you got the
Yeah,
contract.
I mean,
extension.
we got
25 million reasons
Yeah,
to.
good point.
Stay with him.
Their flexibility with that is different. But I don't know. I think there's still something in there, but I don't know why it's not coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I come back to that contract too because I wonder if, like you mentioned, sort of just the way he is mentally, if he's not pressing. Because he even talked about last year because of the short season and the COVID and everything, how he really was pressing to produce when he got into the season because there was only so much time left and and he got off to a slow start. And so when you think about that, if that's sort of something that he's semi-prone to, I mean maybe that's going too far to say he's prone to that, but then you get this contract.
Yeah.
And then he also had the hand thing, which was never really fully explained at the beginning of the season, but there's a thumb thing. He's still wearing that guard. I don't know how bad it was. He played through it, but he got off to that slow start, and then it just piles on top of it, the contract. And, I mean, because there's some at-bats sometimes, like you said, there's some days where it's like, okay, and then there's some at-bats where you're like, ew, he just went up there in swing mode and was just like, that's not the guy that we've seen and the type of at-bats that we've seen.
They're going to be, and not just the contract, I mean, that's a big thing, right? But like if you put that to the side, I think they're going to be really patient with it. Their default mode is to be really patient with that guy because he is one of the most liked guys, in that clubhouse, one of the most respected. I mean, he puts in the work. Like he does all the things that earn a guy the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Vahe, you wrote the story about how they literally put him in Gordo's old locker,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
like that's they're. It seemed like they're putting him, or trying to frame him as one of their leaders
Yeah.
going forward, even though he's a quiet guy. Like
Yeah.
they're setting him up as one of their clubhouse leaders, one of their team leaders.
It's so striking as we talk about this, and I know we see this all the time when guys don't perform as you think they might, but so Dozier, Soler, Keller, I mean, obviously, Mondesi. I mean, if any of those guys were sort of even 2/3 of what you might expect of them, this whole team would look different.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, that was, I mean, you can't envision, well, yes, if you envisioned a season without those guys, you'd have a team that's 33 and 44. That's now in last place by a percentage point in the AL Central.
And then you just add on too, like I just think of the Benintendi thing too.
Yeah.
He had just, what was it, like 7-10 days where he was just crushing it.
Yeah, I mean,
And
player
then-
of the month, right? He was
And then
player
the
of the
rib
month.
cage. It's
Yeah,
just,
he was-
God, they run into some rotten luck, man.
Yeah, and I think that's the depth, is just, and part of that is maybe, and I'm sure people are tired. Oh, well, other teams, it's like, well, part of that's a small market thing. Where they just, and part of it's just they haven't built up enough of the depth that you would want, because other teams do have injuries and are able to still, perform, and not the whole lineup doesn't go down the tubes.
Right.
Part of that, like I say, is if you're a larger market team, you can pay for more depth. You can find, and then if you've had a stronger farm system over an extended period of time, so their depth just isn't quite there when you talk about Mondesi and Benintendi. And with Mondesi, it's also that question of, for a guy who's as dynamic as he is, how do you create depth for that spot and for that type of a player? It's a little tough to really. It's easy to say, tough to do.
Yeah.
Hey, before we head into a break, let's talk about the other change since our last show, and that's Danny Duffy in the hybrid role. And we saw him. We started the game, last night's game, when he 3 2/3, I think, or 3 1/3. 3 1/3. What was his pitch count? 40? Was he in the 40s?
Oh no! Last night he got to 62.
62?
Yeah.
The previous start was 42.
Okay, so why is this happening?
Well, basically, it's the combination of them feeling like they could keep him healthy, or they hope they can keep him healthy, but not necessarily extending him too far in outings. So, like, they don't want to be pushing him to. It sounds like, and we haven't gotten specific numbers, but it sounds like they don't want to be pushing him to 100 and plus on a given outing, and they feel like maybe they could still get maybe a similar amount of innings out of him if they let him do that. Would be a bullpen day anyway, actually throw out of the bullpen in a game. So you're not going to get 5, 6, 7 innings on one night, but if you get, last night they tried to get him through 4, he didn't quite get through 4, and then you get another inning or two, a couple days from now, then you're still getting, 5, 6, maybe 7's probably high, but 6 innings out of him every week or every 5 days or so, and try and keep him healthy, because they felt like when they extended him, that's when the injuries started to prop up. That's where the forearm thing started to get tight. Like, they had a game earlier this season in Detroit that we found out after the fact that's why they cut him down after 5 innings, and it was like he was dealing what's going on. It was because of the forearm thing. They just weren't telling anybody at that point.
So just trying to maximize him, right? I mean,
And I think I understand this right, but I mean, the idea is ultimately to get him back semi-extended to being able to go 100 pitches, or not
I don't know.
necessarily.
That's the part that's a little. It doesn't sound like it, but at the same time, like, I didn't think he would go. They would extend him 60 last night, because the way they made it sound the first time was like, okay, he's going to be similar to what he did that first outing, which was 42 pitches, and then he pitched an inning a couple days later. But last night we saw 62 pitches, and so it almost looks like he is getting stretched out. But
If the goal is to keep him healthy, and 100 pitches every 5 days isn't working, I don't know that 100 pitches and then 3 days later 60, and then 2 days later 100, like that doesn't make any sense. But I think this is such an interesting deal that they're doing with this guy, and it's one of these things. People are like, I don't know, sounds desperate, and there's a lot of truth to that. It's a great line, but I like the Royals have built up, and they don't talk about it that much publicly, but sports science, they're building that up internally, And, if they've got some information and some measurements that are telling them this is a better way to do it, I just think it's a really interesting. I love outside the box. And with the way the season's been going, try something new. And with the way that guy's career has gone, right? Like, he's so talented. And, the issue is not talent. The issue is not focus or work or any of those things. The issue is just health.
Yeah.
I like it, man. Try something
Figure
different.
out a way to get the most out of him.
Yeah.
John Morosi had him as potential Padres trade target.
Yeah.
You think the Royals would? Are
think
the
they would
Royals to
trade
the
him.
point where would they do that? Would they deal him?
I think they've been open to trading him, for not for a long time, but before. And he just passed 10 years
Oh, yeah,
of
5,
service
10,
time,
yeah.
so he would have to approve any deal. But it would make sense for the Royals. I mean, even if they trade him at the deadline, he's on a $15.5 million salary this year, so they'd save, about $5 million, something like that. And if he wanted to go, especially the Padres, he's got a buddy
California
there. And actually, a buddy who once called him the greatest teammate he ever had.
Not far from home either.
Yeah, pitch. I mean, God, that team's talented.
They got a few
that'd be
former
fun.
Royals out there. I
Yeah.
mean, think about, trying to remember the years wise, but I mean, Myers out there, right? Tim Hill out there, Haas. So, I mean, there's a few of them out there.
Yeah, and Duffy's been in the game long enough. He was teammates with him, at some point.
That looks like it would be a fun team to play for.
It would be.
Those guys have a good time.
I'd hate to see him leave, but you got
Sure.
the business of baseball.
Yep.
You got to do what you got to do, right?
Yep.
So, all right, let's take a break and hear from the University of Kansas Health System. And when we come back, I want to talk about how the games in Omaha might have an impact on the Royals.
The Kansas City Royals lineup is backed up by the region's strongest team in healthcare, the University of Kansas Health System. We both suit up with one goal in mind: to win. The University of Kansas Health System, official healthcare provider of the Royals.
I was going to say, are they going to save us?
I mean, he's been.
Okay, we're back. Chatting during the break.
We can't stop.
Curious minds. All right, hey, one more change before we go on to the College World Series, and that is Emmanuel Rivera made his Major League debut. And if you were watching the game, I know Lynn obviously was. So he becomes the first Royal in history to get his first Major League hit at Fenway Park. Kind of cool, I guess. Went 2 for 4. Looked like a family member shooting the whole thing, or maybe he was FaceTiming
great.
himself. I don't know what he was doing.
That was great.
It was pretty cool to see. It was
Yeah.
really cool. So I guess they just kind of got tired of Gutierrez at third, right? They've seen enough of that.
Yeah, and I didn't realize. I realized he had made several errors, but until I actually looked up the numbers, he had 9, and he didn't play that many games. I was
Yeah.
like, hey, that's
Like 40 games or something?
Yeah, less than 40 games and 9 errors. I was like, but he, and I know people look and say, well, obviously we were just talking about Dozier. It's like, well, Dozier at least had some track record. He had some power. He had hard hit rates and different things that if he wanted to, you could squint and say, okay, well, we feel like there's a reason that this might turn around. With Gutierrez, you're squinting a lot harder. And I also, there wasn't the power that he was going to be able to produce. It's just, I think if Dozier had been hitting, I don't know if Gutierrez even really gets that shot. Maybe it was somebody else in the outfield instead of Gutierrez. So, but Rivera, first pitch swinging. You gotta like that. First MLB at bat.
That's a Royals at bat there.
First says, hey,
I don't care what this pitcher has.
first pitch swinging, and been doing well in AAA, and they were talking him up in spring training. Multiple people in the organization were talking about how this is a guy who they'd been looking at for a while. He was starting to show some of the things that they thought he could do. So, at this point, why not give people a shot?
Yeah.
Hey, Jeffrey asks about Bobby Witt Jr., and we can't go a week without talking about Bobby Witt. Is he going to go from AA to AAA before he comes to Kansas City?
Yeah.
That's the plan, right?
Yeah.
Are we getting to about that time?
I think we're getting close.
Didn't we get the sense
Seems like
end of June was when they were going to sort of hard review it? It seemed like
He's
that's
done
the last
nothing
I
but
talked to somebody about.
Give them reasons to think long and hard about it, man. He had a terrible start, just that
Yeah.
first what was it, 18, 19, 20 games? something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
right
But,
in there.
My God, you look at it now. I mean, everybody, the power, the highlights get shown, but he's done that while cutting his strikeouts down. Still chasing a little bit too much, all that stuff, but still, it's God, he's been impressive.
Yeah, because I think it was, and I don't remember how many games exactly, but I know that early on he had a strikeout to walk ratio that was like 3-1 at one point, and then in the last couple of weeks it's gotten down to more like 2-1, and he's still, like, the average has gone up. You still see the power. I mean, everybody obviously looks at these highlights and says, oh, bring him up, and the rankings and highlights will have people say bring him up right now, but there are other things, involved with baseball besides home run highlights and Baseball
Really?
America rankings.
His numbers weren't great for a while. I mean, even until a couple of weeks ago against right-handed pitching. I seem to recall. I thought one of us, we were looking it over one day in here, Blair, maybe, or something. Not trying to put it on you, but I just trying to remember. I remember looking. Go, give me the nod.
I was going to say, you better be right about this.
Yeah, Blair told me. No, but I'm pretty sure they and I think those are going up too. But they were not in the place where you'd want it at that point to say even to go to AAA.
No, I mean, there were some people who pointed out that he played fewer than 40 professional games before the season started.
Some people.
How about Nick Prado?
Yeah.
How about what's his path? What's the timeline of his path? What do we think?
I've wondered about Carlos Santana's contract and if that's, sort of a soft launch. He said that's an interesting guy too. Like he was like where'd they take him? Like 15th overall, somewhere in
round,
there,
yeah.
like 12 to 20, somewhere in there. And he had a year or two in a row where it was not good. And I think there was like some maybe he's first round bust or whatever. But God, he's come along too.
Yeah, not good was kind too. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there was, not just him, but I mean, it was after that 19 season. I think last summer there was a time when Dayton came out and said like somebody was talking about some of these hitting prospects and Dayton said, well, let's not sugarcoat it. It was awful, and there was, and like I said, it wasn't just him, but I mean MJ Melendez was in that group. Like there was a bunch of them that was just like
In Lexington. Right?
yeah, that just the guys that had shown this potential, and then all of a sudden it was like, what happened?
Yeah.
And and a lot of them are off to that hot start. I mean, you got that AA. I was joking earlier in the season, so you got the AA murderers row there with Bobby Witt and Prado and Melendez, and some of that. And you mentioned sort of the way they've revamped some things internally. I mean, the hitting department. I wrote about this last spring training. I think is literally, I think, sort of now called the hitting department. they've restructured, realigned the way they do things, try and develop hitters and be more systematic about it. And short sample size, but I mean, they had all last year. They had going into last year, spring training last year, the alternate training site, and you're starting to see some of these guys who everybody was like, oh, well, maybe they weren't it after all, starting to do what you thought they might be able to do. Prado's one of them, Melendez is one of them, and Prado, for a guy that everybody thought was really talented, and you saw it defensively, like that's already there. Now, one of the most dangerous hitters in AA baseball.
Maybe the alternative site really helped him, last year. That's you hear mixed reviews about the alt site and what the impact it had, and maybe he benefited greatly from that.
It's I don't know what to make of that thing.
I don't know either.
Be
a good book to read sometime for baseball nerds with the alternative site.
And the Royals, I don't think the Royals were doing anything drastically different with the alt site than the other 29. I mean, everybody's got a different approach, but they were trying to make the most of it. I mean, they put a lot of thought and debate and all these things into it. But it does seem like, at least I'll just speak for me, it seems like I just default to, oh, well, of course, like Coar and Lynch struggle, like alt site, It's like, well, yeah, Prado, alt site, he did great. This is great. I don't know.
Nobody does. But yeah, again, I want to read the definitive work on minor league baseball in the summer of 2020. Yeah, by Vahe Gregorian. Okay, so Game 2 of the College World Series in Omaha is tonight. Vanderbilt against Mississippi State. Vandy won the opener behind Jack Leiter, but their number 2 starter, Kumar Rocker, is not going to start tonight. From what I hear, they're going to save him for Game 3. It's his rest, so he would be available for Game 3. But I before the show, I looked on 3 baseball mock drafts, and each one of them had the Royals taking Kumar Rocker with the number 7 overall pick. Is that what you're hearing, or is that what we think might happen? Certainly would be in line with their recent college pitching philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, if he gets that far, then I don't see how you pass on him. But I guess I haven't dove into as many of the mock drafts because I didn't. At least a year ago, there was no thought that he would probably
Be available.
get that far.
He was easily the overall number one going into this year.
Exactly.
But this year hasn't been as productive as last year for him.
Yeah. So
He's been passed by the teammate, right?
Yeah, by Leiter. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, at the same time though, I openly admit I didn't think Asa Lacy was dropping to them at 4 last year either. We're going into that draft because I thought that there would be people who would take him. Somebody's taking him in that top 3, and then all of a sudden, okay, well.
Yeah. I can't pretend like Lynn. I'm not going to pretend that I've studied every other of the top 20 prospects or whatever. So I don't know if there's 7 better. But it's hard to imagine Rocker being available at 8. You know what I mean? If he gets there, I don't know who the Royals would take over him.
They have Leiter going 3rd or 4th. I guess there's a couple of high school shortstops that are studs, including everyone has the Pirates taking this California high school shortstop at number 1, but the Royals at number 7 taking Rocker if he's there. And he was unbelievable last year, unbelievable. But lost a little bit on his fastball, and there people inside college baseball just wondering why there was a change in his velocity this year. But I think if he's there, the Royals take him and continue the whole college pitching trend that they've been on now for a few years. Tracy Rocker's son. The former NFL linebacker, and of course, Leiter is the son of Al Leiter, right?
I've seen it's just interviews and stuff, but the times that I've seen Rocker talk about pitching, he's a nerd. You know what I mean? He thinks about it on a different, sort of a deeper level, and I think that, in addition to everything else, I think that part of it would appeal to the Royals.
We'll get into it in a bigger way on a future show because the draft is it the 13th? 11th. That's right. 11th through the 13th. Right, 11th. So maybe next show because I believe that will be the 13th will be a Tuesday. So anyway, hey, big thanks to University of Kansas Health System for sponsoring us. Thank you for your questions and comments. And as always, thank Vahe, Sam, and Lynn, and our producer, Beth Welsh. So we will see you again next Tuesday.